The snow didn't fall in Chicago, it attacked. Billy Martins felt each flake like a tiny blade against her exposed skin as she stumbled out of the Silver Spoon at 4:15 a.m., her coral backpack weighing down shoulders that had carried trays for 12 straight hours. Her phone screen blurred in her vision. Black sedan, arriving now. She didn't check the license plate. Didn't look twice at the obsidian vehicle idling at the curb, exhaust curling like smoke signals in the frozen air. She just needed to get inside, get warm, get home. The door opened with a weight that should have warned her this was no ordinary ride. But Billy was past the point of caution. She threw herself into the back seat, and the wave of heat that hit her felt like salvation. Cedar, leather, so expensive. It didn't even smell like leather. It smelled like money. The seats were heated. The darkness inside was soft, and her body made the decision before her brain could catch up. Southside, she mumbled, already sinking into the warmth. The apartment building on Kedzie. Thanks. She didn't wait for confirmation. Her eyes were closing before she'd even registered there was someone else in the vehicle. The hum of the engine became a lullaby. The warmth became a cocoon. And Billy Martins, who had spent her entire adult life being invisible to people who mattered, fell into a sleep so deep that even danger couldn't wake her. In the seat beside her, Seon Woo sat perfectly still. He was a man who lived in carefully controlled spaces, who calculated every variable, who never allowed surprises. His world was one of silent luxury and calculated violence, of decisions that moved millions and commands that could end lives. He had been waiting for a contact, a courier, who was now 17 minutes late and likely dead. And instead, a woman in a grease-stained uniform had climbed into his Maybach and fallen asleep against his shoulder. The driver's eyes met his in the rearview mirror, a silent question forming. Seon Woo studied the woman, really looked at her, dark skin gleaming with a light sheen of sweat despite the cold. The kind of exhaustion etched into her features that spoke of survival, not weakness. Her hand still clutched that coral backpack, like someone might try to take it, even in her dreams. She smelled like cheap coffee and fryer oil, and something underneath that was uniquely her own. She was everything his world wasn't. Real, honest, breakable. Drive, Seon Woo said quietly in Korean. Let her sleep, sir? The disbelief in his driver's voice was barely concealed. You heard me. They drove for 45 minutes through Chicago's sleeping streets, while Billy Martins slept like the dead. Seon Woo didn't move, didn't shift away from the weight of her head that had somehow found its way to his shoulder. He simply watched her breathe and wondered what kind of life grinds a person down to the point where they stop seeing danger altogether. When she finally woke, it was with the slow confusion of someone surfacing from very deep water. Her eyes opened, focused on the unfamiliar ceiling, tracked down to the window where a glass tower loomed instead of her neighborhood's brick apartments. She sat up so fast, she nearly gave herself whiplash. Oh my God. Her voice was rough with sleep and rising panic. This isn't I thought. Her eyes found Seon Woo, and he watched her brain try to make sense of the situation. The expensive suit, the predatory stillness, the fact that they were most definitely not on the south side. I'm so sorry, she said, but her voice didn't shake the way most people's did when they realized who he was. I thought this was my rideshare. I didn't even look. I was so tired. I couldn't see straight. Clearly, Seon Woo's voice came out softer than he'd intended. You've been asleep for 45 minutes. 45. She clutched her backpack tighter. Why didn't you wake me up? Why didn't you just kick me out? It was a good question. Seon Woo had been asking himself the same thing. You look like you needed the rest, he said simply. And you are either very brave or very foolish. I haven't decided which. Foolish, Billy said immediately. Definitely foolish. Very, extremely foolish. But her eyes were scanning him now, taking in details, measuring threat. She had street smarts buried under that exhaustion. Are you going to kill me? If I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. He reached for his phone, his movement deliberately slow. Your address was the South Side, Kedzie Avenue. How did you... She stopped herself. Of course you know. You probably know everything about me now, don't you? Not everything. Seon-woo gave instructions to his driver, watching her face as the car smoothly changed direction. But I know your name, Billy Martins. I know you work at the Silver Spoon. I know you take the bus most days because ride shares are too expensive. And I know you just made the most dangerous mistake of your life. Billy's jaw tightened. So, what happens now? Now? Seon-woo studied her for a long moment. Now I take you home, and you forget this ever happened. The car pulled up outside her building 20 minutes later. Billy sat frozen for a moment, clearly expecting some kind of catch, some demand or threat. When none came, she opened the door with shaking hands. Thank you, she said, the words coming out strange, like she couldn't believe she was saying them. Not for just thank you. Be more careful, Billy Martins. Seon-woo's voice carried a warning wrapped in something that almost sounded like concern. The next car you climb into might not be so forgiving. She stepped out into the cold, and Seon-woo watched her stumble toward her building, that coral backpack bouncing against her shoulders. He should have felt relief that the situation had been resolved cleanly. No witnesses, no complications. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Curiosity. 3 days later, Seon-woo walked into the Silver Spoon alone. Asterisk. Billy Martins had no way of knowing that the man in the back booth, the one who ordered black coffee and watched her navigate the chaos of the graveyard shift with those same dark, unreadable eyes, was about to offer her something that would change everything. She had no way of knowing that climbing into the wrong car hadn't been a mistake at all. It had been fate, disguised as exhaustion. And she definitely had no way of knowing that in 3 months' time, she would be standing in an underground lounge called the Orchid, holding the secrets of Chicago's most dangerous men in her hands, while the monster who had let her sleep on his shoulder taught her that sometimes the only way to survive the darkness is to stop running from it. Seon-woo didn't belong in the Silver Spoon. Everything about him screamed wrong. The cut of his black coat, the way silence seemed to follow him like a shadow, the absolute stillness he carried that made the chaos of the diner look even more frantic by comparison. He chose a booth in Billy's section, and she felt his presence before she even turned around, a cold weight pressing against her spine. She approached with her order pad, determined to treat him like any other customer, pretend those 45 minutes in his car had been a fever dream brought on by exhaustion. Coffee, he said before she could speak. Black. His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth as expensive whiskey, with something dangerous underneath. Billy's hand didn't shake as she wrote it down, though her pulse kicked up traitorously. She could feel him watching her as she moved through her section, handling the drunk college kids who got too handsy, the elderly woman who needed help to her car, the trucker who left crumpled singles as a tip. When she brought his check 2 hours later, he hadn't touched the coffee. You're good at this, Seon-woo said, his dark eyes tracking her every micro-expression. Making yourself essential while staying invisible. It's a rare skill. It's called survival. Billy kept her voice neutral, professional. Will there be anything else? Yes. He slid a business card across the table. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering that caught the fluorescent light. I have a proposition. Billy stared at the card without touching it. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. I own a lounge called the Orchid. Private clientele, discreet operations. His fingers drummed once against the table, the only sign of movement in his otherwise perfect stillness. I need a manager, someone who understands how to see everything while appearing to notice nothing, someone who knows the difference between watching and witnessing. You want to hire me? Billy's laugh came out sharp, disbelieving. Based on what? Falling asleep in your car? Based on the fact that you didn't scream when you woke up. You assessed the situation. You asked the right questions. And when I gave you a way out, you took it without drama. Seon-woo leaned forward slightly, and Billy caught the scent of cedarwood again. Most people panic when they encounter the unknown. You strategize. I waitress. I don't manage anything, especially not for... She stopped herself. For men like me? His mouth curved, not quite a smile. Say it, Billy. I won't be offended by honesty. The way he said her name made something low in her stomach tighten. She grabbed the card, if only to have something to do with her hands. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Seon-woo stood, leaving $300 bills beside the untouched coffee. Opportunities like this don't wait. He was gone before she could respond, leaving only the scent of cedarwood and the weight of a choice she wasn't ready to make. Billy told herself she wasn't going to call, told herself for 3 days, while the business card burned a hole in her wallet. But rent was due, her car was making an ominous grinding sound, and the electric company had sent a final notice. She called on Thursday. The orchid wasn't what she expected. No dark alley entrance or shadowy figures. Instead, she found herself standing before a restored brownstone in River North, its windows glowing with warm amber light. Inside, the space breathed old money and new secrets. Velvet booths the colour of aged wine, crystal chandeliers that scattered light like diamonds, art on the walls that Billy suspected was either stolen or priceless. Seon-woo appeared from a back hallway, dressed in charcoal grey that made his dark eyes look almost black. You came. He sounded genuinely pleased, which somehow made Billy more nervous than if he'd been cold. I need the money, she said bluntly. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not doing anything illegal. No drugs, no guns, no washing money or whatever else happens in places like this. Places like what? Don't play games. I know what you are. Seon-woo studied her for a long moment, and Billy forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. Finally, he nodded. The orchid is neutral ground, a place where certain people conduct certain business without interference. Your job is simple. Maintain the space, ensure privacy, manage the staff, and most importantly, forget everything you see the moment it happens. And if something happens that I can't forget, then you come to me. He moved closer, and Billy's breath caught, despite herself. I protect what's mine, Billy. That includes my employees. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat crawling up her neck. When do I start? His smile was slow, dangerous, and entirely too satisfied. Right now. The first shift passed in a blur of learning names, memorizing protocols, understanding the complex hierarchy of the people who walked through the orchid's doors. They were businessmen in expensive suits, women dripping with jewels that cost more than Billy's yearly salary, foreign visitors speaking languages she didn't recognize. But beneath the glamour, she felt the current of violence, saw it in the way conversations stopped when certain people entered, noticed the bulges under tailored jackets, recognized the kind of stillness that only came from people who knew how to kill. Seon-woo watched her from the shadows all night, a dark guardian presence that made her hyper-aware of every movement she made. When the last patron left at 3 a.m., Billy found him in his office, a space of leather and dark wood that smelled like him. You did well, he said, without looking up from the papers on his desk. Those people tonight, they weren't just businessmen. No, he finally met her eyes. They weren't. So what are they? Seon-woo set down his pen, giving her his full attention. Survivors, just like you. 6 weeks into managing the orchid, Billy discovered what it meant to be truly invisible. She moved through the lounge like a ghost, refilling drinks, adjusting lighting, ensuring perfect service, while her mind catalogued every conversation fragment, every exchanged envelope, every weighted glance between dangerous men. She was in the center of Chicago's underworld, and no one saw her at all. Except Seon-woo. He saw everything. The way she tensed when certain patrons arrived, how her jaw tightened when she overheard something particularly dark, the exhaustion that crept into her shoulders during the long nights. He started appearing with coffee, exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, enough cream to turn it pale, left her favorite Thai food in the break room. Once, When a patron had grabbed her wrist with drunken aggression, Seon-woo had materialized from nowhere, his hand closing over the man's with enough pressure to make bones creak. The patron never came back. "You didn't have to do that," Billy said later, rubbing her wrist even though it didn't actually hurt. "Yes, I did." Seon-woo's voice was flat, emotionless. "Touch what's mine. Face the consequences. I'm not yours." "Aren't you?" He stepped closer, crowding her space in a way that should have felt threatening, but instead made her pulse race for entirely different reasons. "You wear my brand on your paychecks, Billy. You sleep safer because my name keeps predators away. You're mine, whether you acknowledge it or not." She should have argued, should have established boundaries. Instead, she found herself leaning into his orbit, drawn by the heat that radiated from his body. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "The best things usually are." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to retreat, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her jaw, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Billy's breath stuttered. Up close, she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the sharp angle of his jaw, the way his pupils dilated as he looked at her mouth. "You should go home," Seon-woo said. But he didn't move away. "Yeah." Billy didn't move either. "I should." Neither of them did. The kiss, when it finally happened, wasn't gentle. It was hunger and desperation, and 6 weeks of tension exploding into contact. Seon-woo's hands slid into her hair, angling her head with controlled intensity, while Billy's fingers clutched his shirt, pulling him closer, even as her mind screamed warnings she couldn't hear over the rush of blood in her ears. He tasted like whiskey and possession, like every dangerous choice she'd ever been too smart to make. His body was all controlled strength against hers, and when he lifted her onto his desk with effortless power, scattering papers that probably contained secrets worth killing for, Billy couldn't find it in herself to care. This was insanity. This was career suicide and emotional devastation wrapped in expensive cologne and deadly hands. This was the best mistake she'd ever made. Seon-woo pulled back just enough to look at her, his breathing unsteady, something raw and almost vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "Tell me to stop," he said. Billy pulled him back down. "Don't you dare." The affair, because that's what it was, an affair conducted in shadows and stolen moments, changed everything and nothing. Publicly, Billy remained the efficient, invisible manager. Privately, she learnt the geography of Seon-woo's body, the scars that mapped his violent history, the sounds he made when control finally slipped. She also learned his loneliness. Late nights in his office, after the Orchid closed and Chicago slept, Seon-woo would talk about growing up in Seoul with a father who trained him for war, about the mother who died, protecting him from that very destiny, about crossing an ocean to build an empire in a country that would never truly accept him, where his foreignness made him both exotic and expendable. "I've spent my entire life being what others needed," he told her one night, his head in her lap, while her fingers traced idle patterns through his hair. The dutiful son, the ruthless boss, the monster who keeps other monsters in line. Sometimes I forget there was ever anything else. Billy's heart cracked open at the vulnerability in his voice. "What did you want to be?" "Free." The word came out barely above a whisper. "Just once. I wanted to make a choice that was only mine." She leaned down and kissed his forehead, tasting salt she pretended not to notice. "You chose me." "Yes." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing with devastating intimacy. "I chose you, but choosing came with consequences." The first warning arrived on a Tuesday, a black rose left on Billy's car with no note. The second was more direct. A text from an unknown number containing her mother's address in Atlanta, her sister's workplace, her nephew's elementary school. "We know everything about you," the message read. "Tell your boss. His mentor sends regards." Billy showed Seon-woo the texts with shaking hands. She watched his face transform from the man who made love to her with devastating tenderness into something else entirely, something cold and terrible. Fucking Kwon. He bit out the name like a curse. He trained me, sponsored my move to Chicago, then decided I'd become too powerful. Now he wants everything I've built. Who is he? The closest thing I ever had to a father. Which makes this betrayal exactly what I should have expected. Seon-woo pulled out his phone, fingers flying over the screen. You're leaving Chicago, tonight. I have a place in Vancouver. I'm not running. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. Billy grabbed his wrist, forcing him to look at her. I choose to stay. I choose to fight. And I choose you, even when it's terrifying. Something in Seon-woo's expression shattered and reformed. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her neck, and Billy felt the tremor that ran through his body. I can't lose you, he whispered, against her skin. I can't. Then don't. Kwon struck on a Friday night, when the orchid was full of neutral parties, deliberate collateral to force Seon-woo's hand. The first explosion shattered the front windows, sending crystal raining down like deadly snow. Billy hit the ground on instinct, her ears ringing, tasting blood from where she'd bitten her tongue. Screaming, gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke mixing with expensive perfume and terror. Seon-woo appeared through the chaos, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, gun in hand. The tunnels. Now. But Billy had already mapped every exit during her first week. She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the kitchen, where a service corridor led to the basement. Behind them, men in tactical gear poured through the shattered entrance, their weapons tracking through the panicked crowd with professional efficiency. A bullet caught Seon-woo high in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He grunted, but kept moving, his free hand pressing against the wound, while Billy hauled him through the kitchen door. Blood slicked her fingers, hot and terrifying. Keep going, he gritted out. Don't stop. The basement was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in sickly green. Billy knew these tunnels, had explored them, out of curiosity, during slow shifts. They connected to 3 neighboring buildings, remnants of Chicago's Prohibition era when speakeasies needed multiple escape routes. She pulled Seon-woo into a reinforced storage room she'd found weeks ago, slamming the heavy door shut and engaging locks that looked older than her grandmother. The sudden silence was deafening after the chaos above. Seon-woo slumped against the wall, his face grey beneath his natural tan. Blood pulsed between his fingers, too much blood, and Billy's nursing instincts from her brief pre-waitressing life kicked in. Let me see. She peeled his jacket away, her stomach dropping at the wound beneath. It went through. That's good. Means the bullet's not still in there. Your optimism is touching. His attempt at humor came out breathless, with pain. Billy stripped off her shirt, using it to apply pressure, while she fumbled for her phone with her free hand. But Seon-woo caught her wrist. No hospitals. Kwon will have people watching every emergency room in the city. Then you'll bleed out down here. Better than the alternative. His eyes found hers in the dim light, and Billy saw fear there. Not of dying, of failing. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I brought you into this. Shut up. Billy pressed harder, ignoring his hiss of pain. You're not dying. I won't let you. She had a plan forming, reckless and possibly insane. There was a doctor who owed her a favor, a retired surgeon who treated her father before he died, who'd taken cash payments and never asked questions. Billy pulled out her phone. Dr. Reyes. It's Billy Martins. I need you. Now. Dr. Reyes arrived within an hour, a grey-haired woman with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much to be shocked by anything. She worked in the dim storage room with the efficiency of someone who'd performed surgery in worse conditions, extracting the bullet fragments Billy had missed and stitching torn muscle with practiced precision. Seon-woo endured it all in silence, his jaw locked tight enough to crack teeth. Only when Billy held his hand did some of the tension ease, his fingers crushing hers with desperate strength. He'll live, Dr. Reyes announced finally, stripping off her gloves. But he needs rest, real rest, not whatever machismo nonsense you people usually do. After she left, Billy sat beside Seon-woo in the darkness, listening to his labored breathing gradually even out. Above them, she could hear footsteps, Kwon's men, searching the building. "They'll find us eventually," Seon-woo said quietly. "Let them try." Billy's voice came out harder than she'd known she could make it. "I have an idea." For 6 weeks, she'd been invisible in the orchid, serving drinks and managing operations. While dangerous men discussed dangerous things, they'd forgotten she had ears. Forgotten she had a mind that catalogued every detail, every admission, every criminal confession spoken over $1,000 whiskey. She'd recorded it all. Not intentionally at first, the voice memos had started as a way to remember supply orders and scheduling notes. But her phone had been in her pocket, during meetings, during hushed conversations in corners, during moments when men like Kwon thought the help couldn't possibly understand the implications of what they were saying. "I have leverage," Billy said. "Recordings, conversations that would destroy half the power players in Chicago if they went public, including Kwon." Seon-woo stared at her, something like awe flickering across his pain-tight features. "You've been gathering intelligence." "I've been surviving. There's a difference." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through files. "Kwon's been embezzling from the council, skimming off every operation you've run for the last 2 years. He's the reason the Yun family thought you were weak enough to challenge." "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I was trying to figure out how to tell you without sounding paranoid." Billy met his eyes. "I know what I am to your world, Seon. I'm the waitress who got lucky, the poor girl playing dress-up in a world of monsters. But I'm also the person they ignore, which makes me the most dangerous person in any room." Seon-woo pulled her down, kissing her with bruising intensity despite his injuries. When they broke apart, his eyes blazed with something that looked like pride. "You're not a waitress anymore, Billy Martins. You're a queen. My queen." They emerged from the tunnels 3 days later, after Kwon's men had given up the search. Seon-woo was still weak, still healing, but there was steel in his spine as they climbed the stairs to his penthouse, where he'd arranged the final meeting. Kwon waited in the living room, flanked by 4 guards. He was older than Billy expected, grey-haired and distinguished, with the kind of face that could sell insurance or order executions with equal ease. So, the prodigal son finally surfaces. Kwon's Korean accent was thick, his eyes dismissive as they passed over Billy. "And you brought your whore. How sentimental." Seon-woo's hand tightened on Billy's waist, but she stepped forward before he could respond. "I'm the whore who's about to destroy you." Billy's voice didn't shake. She pulled out her phone, connecting it to Seon-woo's sound system. "Recognize this conversation?" Kwon's voice filled the room, discussing the embezzlement with crystal clarity, discussing his plan to frame Seon-woo for the council murders, discussing his intention to sell out Chicago's Korean operations to the Yakuza once Seon was dead. The color drained from Kwon's face. "Every crime boss from here to Seoul gets a copy of this, if anything happens to us," Billy continued. "The FBI gets a copy. The media gets a copy. Your wife gets a copy along with the recordings of you and your mistress discussing how you're going to use her inheritance to fund your coup." "You're bluffing," Billy smiled, and it was all teeth. "Try me." Kwon's hand moved toward his jacket, but Seon-woo was faster, despite his injuries. His gun pressed against Kwon's temple before the older man's fingers touched metal. "I should kill you," Seon-woo said quietly. "For my mother, for every lesson you beat into me, for threatening what's mine." "Then do it." Kwon's sneer was ugly. "Prove you're the monster I created." Billy put her hand on Seon-woo's arm, not pulling him away, just anchoring him, reminding him he had choices. "Or," she said softly, "you could walk away. Dismantle everything. Take the money you've hidden in the Caymans and disappear. Let Kwon keep the ashes of an empire we don't want anymore." Seon-woo stared at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You'd leave it all? For you? For a life where we don't sleep with guns under our pillows?" Billy nodded, in a heartbeat. The gun lowered. Seon-woo turned to Kwon, his expression empty of everything except contempt. "You can have Chicago," he said, "but if you ever come near us again, the Those recordings go viral, and I'll make sure you die, knowing your legacy is betrayal and failure. They walked out together, leaving Kwon surrounded by the ruins of his victory. 14 months later, Billy stood on a beach in Montenegro, watching the Adriatic Sea turn gold under the setting sun. The bistro behind her was small, intimate, nothing like the Orchid's dangerous glamour. They served local wine and fresh seafood, and their most threatening customer was the old fisherman who argued about soccer teams. Seon-woo came up behind her, his arms sliding around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. The scar from his gunshot wound was a ridge under her fingers when she reached back to touch his chest. "Any regrets?" he murmured against her neck. Billy thought about it honestly. About the power they'd walked away from, the money, the fear and respect that had followed Seon-woo like a second shadow. About the woman she'd been, exhausted and invisible, in a Chicago diner, and the woman she'd become. "Not a single one," she said. They'd used Seon-woo's hidden accounts to disappear, leaving behind identities that no longer fit. Here, they were just Billy and Seon, owners of a beachside bistro that barely broke even, but made them happier than either had thought possible. Here, Seon slept without nightmares. Here, Billy wore sundresses instead of body armor, disguised as elegant clothing. Here, they were free. A black sedan pulled up to the bistro's small parking area, and Billy felt Seon tense behind her. Old habits, old fears. But then the driver emerged, a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a familiar face. Dr. Reyes smiled at them, carrying a bottle of wine. "Thought I'd visit my favorite fugitives." The tension drained from Seon's body, replaced by a laugh that still surprised Billy with its genuine warmth. That night, they sat on the beach after Dr. Reyes had left. Billy's head on Seon's shoulder, his fingers tangled with hers. "Do you think Kwon kept his word?" Billy asked. "Does it matter?" Seon pressed a kiss to her temple. "We're ghosts now. The monsters we were don't exist anymore." "You were never a monster." Billy turned to look at him, at this man who'd learned tenderness after a lifetime of violence. "You were just surviving the only way you knew how." "So were you." His thumb traced her cheekbone, the gesture achingly familiar. "The woman who fell asleep in my car because she was too exhausted to be afraid. The woman who saw everything I was and chose me anyway. Best mistake I ever made," Billy whispered. "Mine too." They kissed as the stars emerged overhead. Two people who'd found each other in the wrong car at the wrong time and somehow made it exactly right. The coral backpack that had survived Chicago hung on a hook in their apartment, a reminder of where they'd come from. But it was the matching rings on their fingers that mattered, more symbols of the life they'd chosen, over power, love, over survival, each other, over everything else the world had tried to make them become. In the distance, the sea whispered secrets it would never tell. And for the first time in their lives, Billy and Seon-woo whispered back, safe in the knowledge that some stories were meant to stay hidden, known only to the two people brave enough to live them.